My stepsister took my dad's expensive watch to cover her car expenses, and with my stepmom's help, they shifted the blame onto me. As a result, my dad accused me of being unstable, much like he often called my mom, and kicked me out of the house when I was just 17. 4 years later, we unexpectedly crossed paths at my grandfather's 75th birthday party, where something truly shocking happened. My dad's face turned completely pale when Grandpa made a surprising toast. When this all started, I was 17 and am now a 21-year-old woman. I don't want to delve too much into the background, but my relationship with my dad was challenging, to say the least. My stepsister, who is now 20, was always treated as the golden child, while I constantly felt like I was walking on eggshells around both my dad and stepmom. For reasons I could never understand, my stepsister harbored deep resentment towards me. I had done nothing to her, yet she went out of her way to make my life unbearable. To make matters worse, her mother supported her actions and often joined in on her efforts to make my life harder. My dad never opposed his wife and always took her side, punishing me based on whatever false stories they made up about me. At first, I tried to stand up for myself, but it became clear that no one in the household cared about me, so I began withdrawing and keeping to myself. This in turn seemed to irritate my stepsister even more, as she then made it her mission to ensure my life was as miserable as possible. One day, my dad's expensive watch went missing. It wasn't just any watch. It held significant value to him. I didn't even know it was missing until I came home from school to find my dad furious, my stepmom glaring at me with cold disdain, and my stepsister acting completely innocent. I sensed something was wrong but couldn't figure out what. Suddenly, my stepmom began accusing me of stealing the watch, claiming I had been acting strangely and was desperate for attention. Naturally, my stepsister backed her up, saying she had seen me behaving suspiciously near my dad's room. For clarification, the only suspicious behavior on my part was mourning the recent death of my cat, who had been with me since I was 3 years old. My cat had been my sole source of comfort during my parents' divorce, especially since I wasn't allowed to live with my mom, like my so-called cry for attention. Was simply me breaking down in tears during a few family dinners, which my dad insisted we all attend together. The only reason I cried was because my stepsister went out of her way to joke about how much better the house felt without that ugly creature. My dad never told her to stop being so cruel. Instead, he reprimanded me for being overly emotional. I was completely caught off guard by their accusations. I hadn't even realized the watch was missing, let alone been involved in its disappearance. I tried to defend myself, but it was pointless. My dad had already decided I was guilty. He lashed out at me, saying I was just like my mom, whom he always called crazy and a lunatic, and demanded that I leave. He kicked me out of the house that same day. At just 17 years old, with no plan and nowhere to go, I had no choice but to move in with my mom. Over the next 4 years, I didn't hear a word from my dad despite my efforts to reach out and clear my name. Not a single text or phone call. I knew I was innocent, but they didn't care. My stepsister and stepmom had pinned the blame on me, and my dad accepted their story without question. It was deeply hurtful that he didn't even bother to verify their claims or listen to my side of the story. Despite the pain, I focused on rebuilding my life and trying not to dwell on the betrayal. My mom, who has her own mental health challenges and requires a lot of attention, became the center of my world. If there was one positive outcome, it was the chance to spend quality time with her. I graduated from high school and eventually college as well, but my dad was absent from both milestones. Although it hurt deeply, the pain diminished slightly as time passed. A few weeks ago, my grandfather turned 75, and despite everything, I was invited to his birthday party at a farmhouse he had rented for the day. Initially, I wasn't sure if I should go since I knew my dad, stepmom, and stepsister would be there. However, Grandpa and I had always been close. He had been there for me when my dad kicked me out, and while he couldn't provide a place for me to stay since he lives in a retirement home, he supported me financially and emotionally. He was like a best friend to me, and I couldn't miss such an important milestone for him, so I decided to attend. Walking into the party, I was immediately hit with all the old feelings of tension and unease. Seeing my dad sitting with my stepmom and stepsister as though nothing had happened made me feel sick. I stayed as far away from them as I could, but every time I caught sight of them, I felt a lump rise in my throat and I had to fight back tears. I spent most of the time chatting with other relatives to avoid interacting with them. My stepsister completely ignored me, while my stepmom had a smug expression that only made me feel worse. I desperately wanted to confront them publicly, but held back, knowing I couldn't ruin a day that was meant to celebrate Grandpa. I focused on just making it through the party when something totally unexpected happened. At one point, the guests began urging Grandpa to give a toast. Since it was his special day, he agreed. Standing up, he thanked everyone for coming and spoke about how lucky he felt to have lived such a long life filled with wonderful memories of everyone present. Then, out of nowhere, he brought up the story of my dad's missing watch. He revealed that he recently discovered the truth about what happened to the watch. It had been stolen by, my stepsister. I'm not exaggerating when I say my heart felt like it stopped. Grandpa explained that just a week before the party, he was catching up with an old friend who happened to own a pawn shop. While reminiscing, the topic of my dad's missing watch came up. Grandpa's friend mentioned that a few years ago, someone had brought in a very similar watch to sell. Grandpa showed him a picture, and the friend immediately recognized it. The man had recorded the name and ID of the seller, and it turned out to be my stepsister. After some gentle probing from Grandpa, his friend shared more details. Apparently, my stepsister had been panicked when she came in to sell the watch, so much so that she ended up explaining why she was pawning such an expensive item. She even admitted that her mother would come up with a cover story to avoid her getting into trouble with me and my dad. It turned out my stepsister had sold the watch to pay for car repairs after she got into a minor accident while driving drunk, which had wrecked the front of her vehicle. Instead of asking for help, she decided to steal my dad's watch and sell it. Honestly, I doubt her car repairs cost as much as she made from the sale, so I have no idea where the rest of the money went. Knowing my dad would be furious if he found out, she and my stepmom concocted the story about me being the thief. When Grandpa's friend first confirmed that my stepsister was the one who sold the watch, Grandpa couldn't believe it. But after doing more digging, he realized his friend was telling the truth. Grandpa also admitted that he had struggled with whether to confront everyone immediately, but he chose to wait for the party so he could reveal the truth in front of the entire family. His goal was to expose my dad, stepsister, and stepmom all at once, humiliating them while also clearing my name. The moment Grandpa finished his toast, the entire room fell silent. My dad's face turned ghostly pale, my stepsister froze in place, and my stepmom looked as though she'd seen a ghost. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to scream, another part wanted to cry, but mostly I just felt numb. It was as if all the pain and anger I had bottled up over the past 4 years came rushing back at once. I didn't stick around to see what happened next. After Grandpa dropped that bombshell, I quietly left the party. I couldn't bear to watch my dad's reaction or deal with whatever fallout was coming. I needed space to process everything. Walking away, I felt vindicated, but also profoundly sad. I had waited so long for my innocence to be proven, but when it finally happened, I didn't feel the relief I had imagined. Instead, I felt empty. The next morning, Grandpa came by my place to check on me. He was genuinely worried that he might have overstepped by airing our family drama in front of everyone. I assured him I was incredibly grateful for what he had done. He told me he understood how complicated my emotions must be and advised me not to rush into any decisions about my father. He promised to support me no matter what my father or his family said and to stand by whatever decision I made regarding my relationship with him. Now I'm not sure what to do. Since the party, my dad has been relentlessly trying to contact me. First, his texts and voicemails were filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. He admitted he was wrong and said he wanted to make amends. But over time, the tone shifted. His messages began accusing me of brainwashing Grandpa and trying to destroy his marriage to my stepmom. That accusation cut deeply. Honestly, I don't know if my dad could ever prioritize me over his toxic wife and daughter. Sorry, that sounds harsh, but it's how I feel. I'm so conflicted about my emotions. My dad keeps asking to meet and discuss everything that happened, but I don't know if I should. Even if he does apologize, I don't know if I can ever trust him again. 4 years of feeling discarded and unloved don't just disappear overnight. As for my stepsister and stepmom, I haven't heard a word from them, and honestly, I prefer it that way. They destroyed my relationship with my dad and turned my life upside down. I don't think I could ever forgive them for that. I'm torn between wanting to avoid my dad forever and giving him a chance to reconcile. I'm still bitter about everything that happened. Update 1. It's been a week since my original post, and I've lost count of how many comments and messages I've received asking for an update. First, thank you to everyone who shared advice and empathized with me. I was blown away by how many people cared about my situation. Some of you suggested I cut ties with my dad entirely, while others advised giving him a chance to explain. Ultimately, I decided to meet with him, even though my instincts told me not to. I'm not sure why I agreed. Maybe I wanted closure, or perhaps I hoped he would genuinely apologize and show remorse. A small part of me wanted to believe we could rebuild something. I texted him back and arranged to meet at a cafe we used to visit when I was younger. It felt like neutral ground. When I arrived, I saw him sitting there, looking nervous. It was surreal seeing him after so many years, especially after everything that happened at Grandpa's party. For a brief moment, I thought things might go back to how they used to be, but that feeling quickly faded. He started by apologizing, admitting he had made mistakes and expressing regret for believing my stepmom and stepsister. He talked about how hard it's been for him since the truth came out and how he feels like he failed as a father. At first, I felt myself softening. It seemed like there might be a chance for us to rebuild some kind of relationship. But then the conversation took a turn. He launched into a long explanation about how much pressure he was under at the time and how he didn't know who to believe. While I understand that, it doesn't justify how he abandoned me for 4 years. Then, to my shock, he began accusing me of manipulating Grandpa. He claimed he wasn't entirely convinced I hadn't influenced Grandpa to turn against him and embarrass his family in front of everyone. I was so stunned by my dad's accusation that at first I couldn't even respond. The man had essentially admitted that he still didn't completely trust me. I couldn't wrap my head around it. I just sat there in silence, staring at him, trying to process how he could say such a thing. All those messages about wanting to fix things, and now he expected me to apologize? It started to hit me that agreeing to this meeting had been a terrible mistake. He wasn't really here to apologize. Not sincerely, at least. It was clear he just wanted to ease his own guilt or find a way to shift some of the blame onto me. I confronted him about it and told him outright that it wasn't fair to pin any of this on me. I reminded him that it was his choice to trust my stepsister and stepmom without ever giving me a chance to explain myself. Instead of taking accountability, he doubled down, claiming that it wasn't his fault because they had deceived him. He even had the audacity to suggest that I should forgive them because family is family. That was my breaking point. I couldn't listen to another excuse. He wasn't remorseful for what he'd done. He was only upset because he got caught and embarrassed in front of the family. I told him I didn't want to hear from him again unless he was ready to take full responsibility for his actions. Then I got up and walked out. Since that meeting, I've felt strange. That's the best way I can describe it. On the one hand, I feel relieved that I finally confronted him and saw his true colors. On the other, I'm furious that he still couldn't admit his mistakes. He remains more concerned with how things appear to the family than with actually mending our relationship. I feel like I've wasted so much time hoping for closure, only to realize it's never going to happen. To make matters worse, I've heard from a cousin that my stepsister and stepmom are once again trying to twist the narrative. They're telling anyone who will listen that I'm being overly dramatic and making a big deal out of nothing. My cousin even said my stepsister had been bragging about how their side of the family is sticking together while I'm the one isolating myself. I don't know what comes next, but for now I'm done with all of them. My dad clearly isn't going to change, and as for my stepsister and stepmom, they've already caused enough harm. I'm exhausted from being hurt by people who are supposed to care about me. So this is where I'm at. I'm sure of the future, but in no hurry to forgive anyone anytime soon. Day 2? I hadn't planned on providing another update, but things have escalated dramatically. I thought I was done with all the chaos, but my family apparently had other plans. Remember how I said my dad, stepmom, and stepsister were trying to rewrite the story? Well, that plan backfired in the most spectacular way. After meeting with my dad, I decided to cut off contact. I blocked his number and ignored family members who tried to guilt me into giving him another chance. 2 weeks later, my grandpa called me and asked if I could come over to talk. I wasn't sure what it was about, but since Grandpa has always been in my corner, I agreed to hear him out. When I arrived, he explained that he had uncovered some shocking information while reviewing old financial records from the family business. Grandpa had already been suspicious after everything that happened with the watch, so he decided to investigate further. What he found even surprised him. It turned out that my stepmom and stepsister had been running a series of scams behind everyone's backs for years. This wasn't just about the watch. They had been embezzling money from the company, draining funds from my dad's accounts, taking out credit in his name, and accumulating debt, all while hiding it from the family. How did Grandpa figure this out? Apparently my stepsister didn't understand how credit card statements worked. She made purchases through the company accounts, not realizing that Grandpa could see where the transactions were made. When he noticed charges for nail appointments and hair treatments, he knew they weren't my dad's. My stepmom always kept her nails trimmed and avoided heat styling her hair, so the only logical culprit was my stepsister. But that wasn't all. Grandpa also discovered a fraudulent loan taken out in my dad's name, orchestrated by my stepmom to support my stepsister's lavish lifestyle. This wasn't an isolated incident. They had been doing it for years, and my dad had no idea. Grandpa had finally had enough. Rather than involving the authorities, he took action in his own way. Classic Grandpa's style. He went straight to his lawyer and had my dad completely removed from his will. Yes, you disinherited him entirely. Everything that was supposed to go to my dad will now be divided elsewhere, with a substantial portion coming to me. Grandpa explained that by siding with my stepmom and stepsister all these years, my dad had proven he wasn't capable of managing the family's legacy. Additionally, the fact that he threw me out with nowhere to go, and even after learning the truth, still refused to make amends, cemented Grandpa's decision to leave him with nothing. As for my stepmom and stepsister, they're in deep trouble. Grandpa didn't stop at disinheriting my dad. He also ensured that neither my stepmom nor my stepsister could access any family trusts or assets. Everything they thought they'd inherit, gone. Grandpa is even helping my dad sell his house so that my stepmom and stepsister can no longer leech off him financially. But it gets better. When my stepmom found out about Grandpa's decision, she had a full-blown meltdown. She tried to guilt my dad into fighting Grandpa's decision, but there's nothing they can do legally. My dad is trapped, and now he's at the mercy of whatever my stepmom and stepsister decide to do next. And here's the kicker. My stepsister actually reached out to me after all of this. She sent me this pitiful message, practically begging for help because she has no money to sustain her lifestyle now that Grandpa has cut them off. She even tried to spin some sob story about how she never meant for things to get so bad, and blamed it all on being pressured by our stepmom. Throughout all of this, the audacity of my stepsister messaging me about her problems, when she was the one who caused me to be homeless at 17, made my blood boil. Even while reaching out, she couldn't take accountability for her actions, instead placing the blame on her mother. I sent her a brief reply, basically telling her she made her choices and now she had to live with the consequences. I feel no sympathy for her. She and her mother destroyed my relationship with my father and tried to ruin my life, so I see no reason to care about their current struggles. Grandpa warned me that they might attempt to twist this situation against me, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to paint me as the villain again. Now, about my dad. He's in a bad place. He keeps calling and texting, but I've only replied once. I told him that unless he's ready to fully own up to his mistakes and stop shifting the blame onto others, I have no interest in rebuilding a relationship. I can't keep putting myself through this endless cycle of betrayal, forgiveness, and heartbreak. A lot remains uncertain, especially when it comes to how my dad is dealing with everything. A part of me wonders if he will ever cut ties with my stepmom and stepsister completely, or if he's too deeply entrenched in their manipulations to see the truth. Time will tell. For now, I'm focusing on myself, but something tells me this saga isn't over. Update 3. Well, here we are. I wasn't sure if I'd be sharing another update, but so much has happened that I felt it was the right time to wrap everything up. If you've been following my story, you'll know my life has been a whirlwind of family drama. But I can finally say things are improving for me, though the same can't be said for the rest of my family. After Grandpa disinherited my dad and cut off my stepmom and stepsister from the family money, things took a sharp turn. My dad is now in serious financial trouble. When Grandpa said he was selling the house, he wasn't kidding. It turns out my dad didn't even own the property. Grandpa technically held the deed under a trust he controlled. When he cut financial ties with my dad, it also meant the house my dad lived in was no longer his. Grandpa gave my dad one chance. He could stay in the house if he kicked out my stepmom and stepsister. But as expected, my dad couldn't turn his back on the woman who ruined his life. So Grandpa pulled the plug. Within a week, the house was listed for sale and they were given 30 days to move out. The news didn't sit well with my stepmom, who completely lost it. She had a public meltdown, yelled at the real estate agents, threatened Grandpa with legal action, which her lawyer told her was futile, and even tried to guilt-trip my dad into fighting back. Meanwhile, my stepsister tried to convince my dad to sell whatever personal belongings he had left so she could continue making her car payments. Honestly, I think I dodged a bullet by not being raised entirely under my dad's care. Otherwise, I might have ended up just as entitled and shameless as my stepsister. My stepmom and stepsister have struggled to adjust to their new reality, which isn't surprising. After being cut off financially, my stepsister lost access to all the luxuries she was accustomed to. No more designer shopping sprees or expensive vacations. Everything was gone. I can't lie, part of me felt a sense of satisfaction. She desperately needed a wake-up call, and this one was long overdue. As for her attempt to ask me for help, I haven't heard from her since I told her off in my last update. She's probably too busy trying to figure out how to survive without mooching off Grandpa and my dad. Fortunately for my dad, my stepmom made one last desperate move. She filed for divorce. Yes, the same woman my dad gave up everything for has now turned her back on him. Who could have seen that coming? She realized my dad was practically broke and decided there was no reason to stay. She likely hoped to get a large settlement for the divorce, but Grandpa had already ensured there was nothing left for her to take. She's now stuck with nothing, which honestly doesn't surprise me. She was always in it for the money, and once that dried up, she bailed. As for my dad, I haven't spoken to him since I told him I wouldn't consider a relationship until he fully acknowledged his role in everything. I don't see that happening anytime soon. He's still in denial, clinging to the idea that somehow this is all my fault, or Grandpa's fault, for how things turned out. Until he can face the truth about how he allowed himself to be manipulated by my stepmom and stepsister, I don't see us having any relationship at all. It's a sad situation, but I've made peace with it. Grandpa, on the other hand, is doing incredibly well. He's been a pillar of support for me throughout this entire ordeal, and our bond has only grown stronger since the truth came out. We've had many conversations about the future, and he's made it clear that he wants to ensure I'm well taken care of after everything I've endured. So, I suppose this is where the story ends? My dad, stepmom, and stepsister are finally facing the consequences of their actions, while I'm moving forward with my life. I'm in a much better place now, financially and emotionally, and I have no intention of letting any of them drag me down again. It's been a long, turbulent journey, but I'm proud of where I've ended up. Thank you to everyone who took the time to leave comments and offer support. I hope to return here someday, maybe in 5 years, to share how much better my life has become.